In the next 2 hours, you'll hear powerful subconscious techniques used by experts in psychological influence. But instead of manipulation, we'll use them to guide your mind into a deep, peaceful sleep. You don't need to do anything. Just lie back, close your eyes, and let the voice guide your thoughts into silence. Let's begin. The mirror effect is one of the most subtle yet powerful psychological tools for building rapport and influencing others. At its core, it involves subtly imitating someone's body language, speech patterns, or emotional tone. This creates a sense of familiarity and connection because when people see themselves reflected in another, they instinctively feel understood and safe. This effect is hardwired into us. From infancy, we mimic others to bond and learn. Babies copy facial expressions, friends adopt each other's mannerisms, and longtime couples often mirror each other without realizing it. Matching someone's pace, tone, or vocabulary can quickly build comfort. If they speak slowly and formally, adopting a similar style puts them at ease. It helps make great first impressions, eases conflict, and builds influence naturally. Whether you're networking, dating, or just trying to get along better with others, understanding mirroring can help you navigate social dynamics with more intention and impact. Even echoing keywords they use helps form an unconscious bond. Behind this is the brain's mirror neuron system, which helps us empathize and feel what others feel. When used intentionally, mirroring can shape how others perceive you. It's especially effective in body language. If someone leans forward, you do the same a moment later. Manipulators use mirroring to create false intimacy, copying interests, emotions, or attitudes to gain trust and exploit it later. If someone mirrors you too perfectly or shifts their behavior to match whoever they're around, it may be a red flag. If they gesture with their hands, you mirror with similar movements. Subtlety is crucial. Too much, and it feels fake. Done right, it creates harmony and trust on a subconscious level. It also works in speech. Emotional mirroring is another layer. If someone is excited, reflecting their enthusiasm makes them feel validated. In social settings, it accelerates bonding and eases tension. Even in high-stakes negotiations, mirroring posture or phrasing can lower defenses and build subtle alignment. If they're upset, matching their tone rather than immediately trying to cheer them up signals that you understand and care. Therapists, negotiators, and sales professionals often use mirroring to build trust and guide conversations. However, this technique can also be abused. Used ethically, the mirror effect is a powerful tool for connection. The foot and thought technique, first making it much more likely they'll say yes to a larger one later. If someone signs a petition for animal rights, they now see themselves as someone who supports the cause. So when asked to donate, volunteer, or take further action later, they are more likely to comply because saying no would feel inconsistent with who they just declared themselves to be. It's rooted in the psychological principle of consistency. Once people commit to something, marketers ask you to try a free sample before offering the full product. If you find yourself agreeing to things incrementally without fully thinking them through, pause. Its power depends on how it's used. Being aware of it gives you the choice to use it wisely or resist it when needed. Ask yourself, am I doing this because I genuinely want to, or because I feel obligated to stay consistent? Remember, you always have the right to say no, even after saying yes to something smaller. Salespeople start by getting you to try on a jacket before nudging you to buy. Charities ask for an email sign-up before requesting donations. Each request feels like a continuation of the last, not a sudden leap. That prevents the person being influenced from recognizing they being the donned. That what makes the foot in the door so subtle and powerful. Each step feels small and reasonable, but together they build a path toward bigger commitments. They feel internal pressure to stay consistent with that image of themselves. This shift in self-perception is powerful. This method is everywhere. Cults, scams, and abusive relationships often rely on this tactic to wear down resistance. They start small, harmless, even then slowly escalate demands until the target feels trapped by their earlier choices. It also shows up in relationships and workplace dynamics. Then later request help with a major report. A coworker might first ask you to review a short email. In manipulative relationships, someone might begin with minor controlling behavior, then escalate over time, each new demand feeling like a natural next step. The effectiveness of this technique lies in its gradual nature. But there's a dark side. Strengthen responsibility and build meaningful commitment. But like any tool of influence, the key to protecting yourself is awareness. Used ethically, the foot in the door technique can encourage good habits. The Dorothy face technique flips the script. Instead of starting small, you begin with a large, unrealistic request, expecting it to be rejected. Then you follow it up with a much smaller request, which suddenly seems reasonable by comparison. When someone turns down a big request, a seller might offer a high-end product first, knowing you'll decline. When they follow up with a cheaper option, it feels like a better deal even if it was their real goal all along. Charities do the same by asking for a large donation first, then suggesting a smaller one once you've said no. Teachers might use it to motivate students by presenting a big challenge, then scaling it back. Nonprofits use it to secure donations without pressuring too much. The technique itself isn't inherently manipulative, all in how it's used. They feel a subtle social pressure to meet you halfway, When you retreat to a smaller ask, it feels like you're conceding. A teen might ask their parents for a $500 gadget, get turned down. People don't like saying no outright, and they especially don't like doing it twice in a row. In toxic dynamics, someone might use it to make a controlling or invasive demand seem acceptable. If something feels excessive or clearly not serious, it might just be a setup. Step back and ask whether you would agree to it. If it had been the first and only ask. For instance, a partner might forbid you from going out entirely, then compromise by letting you go out under strict conditions. The outcome is still control, but it feels more reasonable by contrast. The second request gives them a chance to feel generous or cooperative without giving in completely. Then settle for something $50, making the parents more likely to agree. Or, in job negotiations, an employee may ask for a 20% raise. Then accept 10%, which now seems reasonable by comparison. So they feel obligated to do the same. This contrast makes the second ask feel like a compromise, increasing the chances that it will be accepted. This method plays on the principle of reciprocity. It's commonly used in sales. You'll also see it in everyday situations. The reason this works is psychological discomfort. However, this technique can also be manipulative. To protect yourself, pay attention to unrealistic first requests. Used ethically, the door-in-the-face technique can be a valuable tool in persuasion. Understanding how this dynamic works lets you use it wisely and avoid being influenced by it without realizing. The Zynic Effect. The Zynic Effect is a psychological phenomenon that explains why unfinished tasks, unresolved thoughts, and incomplete experiences tend to linger in our minds far more than completed ones. Named after Russian psychologist Bloomer Zynic, who first observed this effect. The principle states that our brains hold on to unfinished business with a sense of urgency, creating an internal tension that pushes us to complete what we started. This effect is why we can remember details of a task we left incomplete far more vividly than one we finished without interruption. When someone experiences an argument or unresolved tension in a relationship, their brain keeps replaying the situation, searching for closure. This is why people often dwell on unfinished conversations, thinking about what they could have said or done differently. Unresolved emotions create mental loops that are difficult to escape until some form of closure is achieved. One of the most common examples of the Zynic effect occurs in entertainment, anxiety, and overthinking. People who struggle with perfectionism often experience heightened effects as their minds constantly fixate on what still needs to be completed. It's also a key factor in why intrusive thoughts persist when the brain perceives an emotional or cognitive task as unfinished. It keeps bringing it back into awareness. This is why certain forms of therapy, such as cognitive behavioral techniques, focus on reframing unresolved issues or consciously closing mental loops to reduce psychological distress. Cliffhangers in television shows are a perfect illustration of this principle at work. One way to use it positively is by deliberately starting a task even when motivation is low once engaged. The brain will naturally push for completion. Similarly, breaking larger tasks into smaller, unfinished segments can keep motivation high. If something feels mentally overwhelming, setting up a to-be-continued mindset rather than a start-from-scratch approach makes follow-through easier. Their brain remains in a state of constant tension. The Zynic effect is also why making lists and externalizing tasks onto paper helps free up mental space. When people rely solely on memory to track unfinished work, writing things down provides a sense of external closure, reducing the mental load and making it easier to focus. By recognizing how the Zynic effect influences thoughts, behaviors, and emotions, individuals can gain better control over their mental processes. Whether it's improving productivity, closing unresolved emotional loops, or resisting psychological tricks used in marketing and persuasion. Awareness of this effect provides a significant advantage in navigating both personal and professional life. Many people find it difficult to start working on a task, but once they begin, the Zynic effect kicks in. The brain recognizes that something has been left incomplete and keeps nudging the individual to finish it. This is why starting a project, if it asks just a small step, can make it easier to follow through. Writers often use this trick by stopping their writing in the middle of a sentence rather than at a natural stopping point. When they return, their brain is already engaged, making it easier to continue. When an episode ends with unresolved tensions, such as a shocking revelation or an unanswered question, the audience is left in a state of psychological discomfort. Their brains continue processing the unfinished storyline, making them eager to watch the next episode to resolve the tension. This is why binge watching is so addictive. The moment a show leaves something incomplete, the mind struggles to let go until closure is achieved. This effect also plays a significant role in motivation. Marketers and advertisers also leverage the Zynic effect to capture attention and create curiosity. Headlines like "The Secret to Success," "No one talks about," or "You won't believe what happened next" trigger the brain's need for closure, compelling people to click on an article or watch a video. Similarly, sales strategies often include open-ended offers, such as limited time deal, find out more inside, making customers feel like they need to continue engaging to get the full information. The Zynic effect isn't just about external influence, it also affects internal thoughts and emotions. The dark side of the Zynic effect is that it can contribute to stress. Understanding the Zynic effect can be a game changer for productivity and mental well-being. Guilt tripping. Guilt tripping is a psychological manipulation tactic that makes someone feel guilty or responsible for a situation in order to control their actions. It plays on human emotions, particularly the deep-seated need to be seen as a good person and avoid disappointing others, subtly implying that your actions or lack thereof are hurting them. Statements like, "I guess I'll just do it myself even, though I always help you," instead of simply asking for more communication. A partner might say, "If you really loved me, you'd call me more often." A boss might say, "I thought you were a team player, but I guess you don't return favors," guilt-tripping someone into doing extra work. Remind yourself that everyone is responsible for their own feelings. But if you don't want to put in extra hours, that's your choice. While it's natural to want to help others, making an employee feel guilty for setting boundaries. Colleagues might say, "I covered for you last time." If someone tries to make you feel responsible for their emotions, the moment you stop feeding into the guilt, the manipulator loses their power over you, turning a personal choice into an act of neglect. True support should come from a place of genuine kindness, not emotional coercion. Because people generally want to be seen as reliable and considerate, they often give in to such pressure even if it means sacrificing their own needs. If you cared about our relationship, you wouldn't go out with your friends tonight, particularly in situations where direct confrontation would be less effective. It's a favorite technique of manipulative individuals because it allows them to get their way without appearing aggressive or controlling. They make their target feel as though they are the ones at fault, compelling them to act out of remorse rather than genuine willingness. The guilt tripper seeks to control behavior by making their target feel like any act of independence is a betrayal. But I have to do what's best for me. If someone is constantly made to feel guilty for prioritizing their own needs, it's crucial to recognize it for what it is: manipulation disguised as emotional appeal. If someone makes you feel guilty for setting a boundary or making a decision, pause and ask yourself whether their feelings are truly your responsibility. Instead of falling into the trap of apologizing or over-explaining, respond with firm but calm statements like our classic guilt-tripping phrases. "I understand that you're upset." Acknowledging their feelings without accepting guilt is the best way to break the cycle. Guilt trippers plant emotional traps, making their target feel like they owe them something. They begin to associate self-care with selfishness. This leads to a pattern of people-pleasing, where they constantly sacrifice their well-being to avoid disappointing others. In extreme cases, prolonged exposure to guilt-tripping can lead to anxiety, resentment, and emotional exhaustion. Or after everything I've done for you, this is how you treat me. These statements are not direct requests, but rather calculated expressions designed to provoke a sense of obligation. That rejecting their request or standing up for yourself feels like an act of cruelty or selfishness. The guilt tripper strategically positions themselves as a victim. A parent might say, instead of openly communicating their needs, the goal is to make you feel responsible for their emotional state, even when you haven't actually done anything wrong. Once guilt takes hold, the target often feels pressured to make amends, even if it means going against their own best interest. When someone guilt trips you, they frame a situation in such a way instead of asking directly for what they want. They manipulate your emotions so that you feel obligated to comply. At its core, guilt tripping exploits the natural human tendency to seek approval and avoid conflict. One of the most common ways guilt tripping appears is through passive-aggressive remarks. Guilt tripping is often seen in relationships, particularly in toxic friendships, romantic dynamics, and family interactions. This manipulation tactic is also commonly used in workplaces. Guilt tripping can be a subtle yet powerful tool in persuasion. One of the most dangerous aspects of guilt tripping is that it can erode a person's sense of autonomy over time. To defend against guilt tripping, the best way to handle guilt tripping is to maintain strong personal boundaries. Triangulation. Triangulation is a manipulation tactic where a person brings a third party into a conflict or interaction to gain control, create division, or increase their own influence. Instead of dealing directly with an issue, the manipulator involves another person to either reinforce their position, create jealousy, or shift the power balance in their favor. By introducing a third party, they make the situation more complex and emotionally charged, favoring one child while making the other feel inadequate. When people are uncertain about where they stand in a relationship, they are more susceptible to manipulation. The person at the center of the triangulation often remains in control because they dictate how information is shared and how conflicts are perceived. Recognizing the tactic early can help prevent unnecessary emotional distress. If someone frequently tries to pit people against each other or plays mind games to maintain control, it's a sign of toxic behavior that should not be tolerated. The best way to neutralize triangulation is to remove yourself from the manipulative dynamic and engage only in open, honest, and direct communication. Instead of addressing problems directly, they manipulate emotions, causing others to react based on incomplete or distorted narratives. They may say things like, "Why can't you be more like your brother?" creating tension between the siblings while reinforcing their own position as the authority figure. This form of triangulation can leave lasting psychological scars, as it fosters resentment and prevents healthy relationships from forming. Whether it's used in relationships, workplaces, or families, it's designed to create division and exert control. Once you recognize the pattern, you regain the power to see through the manipulation and refuse to play the game, making it harder for their target to defend themselves or see the real source of the manipulation. The manipulator uses a third person subtly, sometimes overtly, to alter the dynamics of the situation. If someone tries to manipulate you by introducing a third party into a conflict, refuse to engage in indirect discussions. Instead, confront the person directly and insist on resolving the issue without outside interference. If someone attempts to make you feel jealous or insecure by bringing up another person, recognize it as an emotional manipulation tactic rather than a genuine reflection of your worth. This technique is commonly used in toxic relationships, dysfunctional workplaces, and manipulative social settings. The core strategy behind triangulation is simple. Rather than addressing a concern or disagreement with someone directly, one of the most common forms of triangulation occurs in romantic relationships. A manipulative partner may bring up another person, perhaps an ex, a coworker, or even a fictional admirer, to create insecurity and competition. They might say, "You never compliment me like Sarah does," or "My ex always understood me better." This plants seeds of doubt, making the target feel as though they need to work harder to maintain the relationship. The manipulator's goal is to create emotional instability, ensuring that their partner remains anxious and eager for validation. Triangulation is also a frequent tactic in toxic workplaces. A manager might play employees against each other by saying things like, "John always stays late to finish his work." By keeping employees uncertain of their standing, the manipulator maintains control over the group dynamic. Similarly, gossip is often used as a form of triangulation, where a person spreads selective information to different individuals to manipulate how they perceive one another. Family dynamics are another area where triangulation can be especially damaging. A parent might play siblings against each other. One of the reasons triangulation is so effective is that it creates confusion and emotional instability. To counter triangulation, the key is direct communication. Setting boundaries is essential when dealing with a manipulator who uses triangulation. Triangulation is a psychological tool that thrives in environments of secrecy, insecurity, and competition. The silent treatment. The silent treatment is a psychological manipulation tactic where one person deliberately ignores or withholds communication from another as a form of punishment, control, or coercion. It's a passive-aggressive strategy used to create discomfort and force the other person into submission rather than confronting an issue. Directly, the manipulator uses silence as a weapon to instill guilt, confusion, and anxiety. The emotional withdrawal feels like rejection, triggering the brain's social pain centers and making the target desperate to restore connection. This desperation often leads them to apologize or compromise, even when they ve done nothing wrong, making them more vulnerable to future control at its core. The silent treatment hijacks the basic human need for connection. It exploits our natural discomfort with emotional distance, especially when it's sudden or unexplained over time. This tactic can break down a person's self-esteem as they begin to associate conflict with abandonment and learn to suppress their own needs just to keep the peace. It's particularly common in toxic relationships. Is used as a bargaining chip in romantic settings where communication is replaced with manipulation and affection. The silent treatment often follows a disagreement and is used to make the other person feel guilty or afraid of losing the relationship. It's not about cooling off or gaining clarity, but about power and punishment in family dynamics. A parent might use silence to discipline a child, making them feel unworthy of attention. It may show up as exclusion from meetings, being ignored unless they conform in workplaces, or having one's input dismissed, creating an environment of fear. The same brain regions as physical pain rather than collaboration. The damage caused by the silent treatment is real. Research has shown that social rejection lights up. And when this form of rejection comes from someone we care about, the impact is magnified. It creates a psychological loop where the victim constantly seeks validation but receives none, often leading to over-apologizing, self-blame, and emotional exhaustion. It's important to differentiate the silent treatment from healthy silence. Sometimes people need space to process emotions or avoid escalating a situation. The difference lies in the intent. Healthy silence seeks resolution, while manipulative silence seeks control. One is grounded in self-awareness, the other in punishment. If you find yourself on the receiving end of the silent treatment, the best response is not to chase after the manipulator for validation, but to recognize the behavior as toxic and set firm boundaries. You can calmly communicate your willingness to talk, but make it clear that emotional withholding is unacceptable if the silence continues. Choose to disengage and protect your own mental health, and intentional silence should never be a form of control, rather than being drawn into a cycle of guilt and appeasement. The moment you stop giving the silent treatment power by refusing to internalize it, the manipulator's control begins to fade. In healthy relationships, communication doesn't stop when things get hard. It becomes more honest, but a space for healing, growth, or reflection. The best defense against the silent treatment is self-respect and the refusal to accept emotional abuse disguised as withdrawal. The illusory truth effect. The illusory truth effect is a psychological phenomenon where people begin to believe false or misleading information simply because they hear it repeatedly over time. Repetition makes the information feel familiar, and familiarity is often mistaken for truth, even if the actual content is inaccurate. This is why repeating a lie or half-truth over and over eventually makes it stick. People stop questioning its accuracy and start internalizing it as fact. This cognitive bias influences everything from advertising to politics to social media content, without people realizing how deeply it affects their beliefs and memories. Studies show that when people are exposed to repeated misinformation, they may later misremember events to fit the repeated narrative. The more we hear a falsehood, just because something sounds familiar doesn't mean it's true. Always question the source. Look for supporting evidence and consider alternative perspectives. The more our brains reshape past memories to align with it. Ask yourself if it's been repeated because it's accurate or because someone wants it to feel that way. Being aware of this bias helps you make informed decisions based on logic and evidence, rather than emotional resonance or repetition. The brain prefers shortcuts, and when a message becomes easier to process, it also becomes easier to accept. Our minds interpret fluency or ease of understanding as a sign of credibility. The illusory truth effect is widely used in marketing. Advertisers repeat slogans, benefits, and taglines until they become part of a brand's identity. Statements like "this product works better than all the rest," or 9 out of 10 people prefer our brand may not be objectively true. But once they're repeated enough times, consumers start to believe them. Politicians and media figures also rely on this effect by reinforcing narratives through constant repetition. When a politician keeps repeating a false claim, the public's familiarity with the message eventually makes it feel true even in the face of evidence to the contrary. Repeated rumors, even when unverified, gain traction simply because they are heard often enough. Once enough people repeat a falsehood, it begins to carry weight and feel like common knowledge. This is how conspiracy theories spread, how personal reputations are ruined, and how groupthink takes over individual judgment. The more the message is echoed across different media, if you tell yourself repeatedly that you're not good enough or you always fail, you may start to believe it even when reality says otherwise. The deeper it embeds itself in public consciousness. This effect also plays out in everyday interactions. Even negative self-talk is influenced by the illusory truth effect. This effect doesn't just change beliefs, can actually distort memory. This is especially dangerous in political propaganda and biased reporting, where selective repetition alters public memory and historical context. To guard against the illusory truth effect, the key is critical thinking. If something has been repeated many times, true understanding comes from active investigation, not passive acceptance. The more we challenge the messages we hear, the more resistant we become to manipulation. Recognizing the illusory truth effect helps you reclaim the ability to form beliefs based on reality, repetition. Gaslighting. Gaslighting is a psychological manipulation tactic where one person tries to make another question their own memory, perception, or sanity. It is a form of emotional abuse used to gain control by distorting the truth and denying reality. Where a husband convinces his wife she's going insane by subtly changing elements of their environment and denying that anything has changed. The essence of gaslighting lies in consistent denial, contradiction, and misinformation. Over time, gaslighting erodes a person's confidence, making them dependent on the manipulator's version of events. "You're too sensitive. That never happened." Parents might rewrite childhood events. When leaders or institutions deny past statements, alter facts, or insist that the public is misremembering documented events, prolonged exposure leads to anxiety, depression, and even a distorted sense of self. If you notice someone constantly makes you doubt yourself, document conversations and experiences. Writing things down or sharing them with trusted friends can help you stay grounded in reality. People who are gaslighted often withdraw socially, stop speaking up, and lose confidence in their decisions. The more you believe in your own memory and perception, the less vulnerable you become to this type of abuse. Instead, assert your perspective calmly and, if possible, disengage from the manipulation. When you own your reality, you take back your power. Once you stop questioning yourself and start validating your own experiences, their control weakens. They create an atmosphere of confusion that weakens independent thought. Deny past hurtful actions or claim the victim is exaggerating, fostering guilt and confusion, especially in adult children. This long-term exposure can deeply affect one's identity and emotional resilience. Deny past instructions or misrepresent conversations to maintain dominance. Coworkers may gaslight each other to manipulate group perception or protect their own reputation. Or, you always remember things wrong, even when the victim is certain of what occurred. This repeated distortion causes confusion, frustration, and self-doubt. Today, gaslighting is common in toxic relationships, power dynamics, and even media narratives. The manipulator may say things like, "Eventually." The victim starts to believe the problem lies with them, not with the abuser making it easier for the manipulator to assert control. In romantic relationships, gaslighting often looks like one partner rewriting history. During arguments or blaming the other for issues they themselves created. They may minimize the victim's emotions or claim others see the situation the same way, creating a false sense of isolation. In workplaces, a manager might shift blame for mistakes onto employees. Family environments can also be breeding grounds for gaslighting. Gaslighting also shows up in broader social and political discourse. By undermining people's trust in their own perception, they gain power over how reality is interpreted. The damage gaslighting causes can be severe. To fight back against gaslighting, the first step is awareness. Set clear boundaries and refuse to argue with someone who constantly denies facts. The goal of a gaslighter is to make you doubt your reality. Rebuilding self-trust is key. Gaslighting thrives in secrecy, confusion, and silence, but the truth can break its hold. Love bombing. Love bombing is a psychological manipulation tactic where someone overwhelms you with excessive affection, compliments, gifts, and attention early in a relationship to gain control over your emotions. But behind the flattery lies a hidden agenda to fast-track emotional dependence. At first, the target feels euphoric, special, and deeply wanted, but that's precisely the point. Once the manipulator senses that you're emotionally hooked, the behavior shifts. In cults and controlling communities, leaders often use love bombing to indoctrinate new members, making them feel uniquely chosen before the rules tighten and the control sets in. It's the same tactic, whether used by a toxic partner, a manipulative boss, or a coercive group. The compliments fade. Real relationships allow space, boundaries, and mutual discovery. The moment you see it for what it is, you reclaim your emotional autonomy. Real love respects your pace. It doesn't rush to possess weight to grow. If someone is moving too fast, overwhelming you with attention, or making big emotional commitments early on pause, ask yourself, is this about genuine connection, or am I being emotionally disarmed? The key is to slow down and observe. If the affection disappears when you set a boundary, that's your answer. The attention becomes inconsistent. This sudden withdrawal creates confusion and craving. Victims often start chasing the manipulator, trying to regain the love they once received. It's the emotional version of Batan's witch. What felt like love was really a setup for dependency. The manipulator now holds the power. Love bombing is not about love, it's about control. This tactic works because it hijacks the brain's reward system. The manipulator floods the target with dopamine-producing experiences, constant messages, dramatic gestures, promises of a perfect future, which creates emotional addiction. You're my soulmate, or let's move in together within days or weeks. The manipulator may shower their partner with lavish gifts, intense declarations, and non-stop communication. In friendships or workplace settings, it might take the form of over-the-top praise, unsolicited favors, or someone claiming an instant, deep bond. This tactic isn't genuine connection, it's artificial intimacy used to disarm you. The brain starts to associate this person with feelings of validation and worth, which makes it hard to recognize red flags. Victims often ignore inconsistencies, rationalize controlling behavior, or overlook how quickly things are moving because they've been emotionally flooded into submission. In romantic relationships, love bombing often begins with statements like "I've never felt this way before." The dangerous part comes after the initial high. Love bombing is a hallmark of abusive cycles. It's the idealization phase before devaluation and eventual discard. To protect yourself, watch out for intensity that feels too good to be true. Healthy love builds over time. Love bombing is not love, it's manipulation disguised as devotion. Triangulation. Triangulation is a manipulative tactic where a third party is intentionally introduced into a relationship dynamic to create insecurity, competition, or confusion. The manipulator uses this third person, real or implied, as a psychological tool to assert control, provoke jealousy, or destabilize their target. It's an indirect form of emotional abuse that keeps the victim off balance and seeking approval, often without realizing they're being pitted against someone else. The core of triangulation is comparison. Ask, why is this third party being brought up? What purpose does it serve? Once you shift your attention back to the real issue, your boundaries, your worth, your values, the triangle collapses. You're not in competition with anyone for respect. If someone makes you feel like you are, that says more about their tactics than your value. A healthy relationship doesn't require you to compete for love, approval, or inclusion. If someone is constantly referencing others to control how you think, feel, or behave, call it out. Refuse to participate in the triangle. Instead of addressing issues directly, the manipulator references someone else, sen X, a coworker, a sibling, even a hypothetical person, as a way to influence your behavior. By setting people against each other, they maintain control at the center of the dynamic. It prevents the target from feeling secure, encourages dependence on the manipulator's approval, and makes it harder to form alliances or healthy boundaries. When you're always wondering where you stand compared to someone else, you're easier to control. They never complained like you do. I could be with someone who appreciates me more. Or, everyone else thinks I'm right. These statements aren't just hurtful, they're calculated. They shift the focus away from the issue and onto your inadequacy. In romantic relationships, triangulation often involves invoking an ex or another potential romantic interest. A partner might flirt with others in front of you, or mention how attractive someone else is to spark jealousy and make you compete for their affection. In families, parents might compare siblings to control behavior. Why can't you be more like your brother? In workplaces, a boss may praise a colleague's performance in your presence to subtly undermine your confidence and create rivalry. The manipulator benefits from this chaos. Triangulation also thrives in group settings where one person subtly spreads conflicting information or plays sides to keep others off balance. In toxic friend groups, one person might say, "They told me they don't trust you, but I defended you." This creates false alliances and keeps everyone guessing, eroding trust and making the manipulator the only stable figure in the social web. To defend against triangulation, recognize when you're being drawn into unnecessary comparisons or rivalries. The power of triangulation lies in misdirection. Projection. Projection is a psychological defense mechanism where someone attributes their own thoughts, feelings, or behaviors onto someone else, often to avoid facing uncomfortable truths about themselves. In the hands of a manipulator, projection becomes a form of gaslighting, way to blame others, evade accountability, and distort reality. Instead of confronting their own guilt, they deflect suspicion by blaming the other person. It's not about evidence, it's about shifting focus. Similarly, someone who lies frequently might accuse others of being dishonest. A person who is angry may call you aggressive. When confronted, the manipulator redirects by accusing you of the very thing they're doing. "You never listen to me," they say, after cutting off every conversation. If someone constantly accuses you of behaviors that don't match your values, pause and ask, "Is this really about me?" Keep records if necessary. Talk to people who know you well and can offer perspective. Don't accept distorted mirrors as accurate reflections. "You're so selfish," they insist, while demanding constant attention. It's a psychological mirror, cracked and turned against you. You're not required to carry someone else's baggage just because they handed it to you. Their insecurities, guilt, or dishonesty are theirs to own. Refusing to absorb their projections is not just self-preservation, it's a reclaiming of your reality. The clearer you are on who you are, the harder it is for someone else to convince you otherwise. A manipulative friend might say, "You're the toxic one," when they're the one creating chaos. This inversion of roles creates confusion and self-doubt in the target. When someone projects, they're not just misunderstanding you, they're rewriting the narrative to protect their own ego. Most people, when accused of something, will stop and reflect. Did I really do that? Manipulators exploit this tendency, knowing that emotionally mature people will pause to examine their own behavior. Sometimes people genuinely can't face parts of themselves, so they offload them onto others. But in manipulative hands, projection becomes strategic. It allows the abuser to preserve their self-image while disorienting their target. You're left defending yourself against accusations that feel off, but are delivered with such conviction that you start to doubt your instincts. The more you try to defend yourself, the more entangled you become in their distorted version of reality. Over time, victims begin to internalize the blame, even when it doesn't fit. The classic example is the cheater who accuses their partner of infidelity. Projection works because it preys on empathy and introspection. In toxic relationships, projection often accompanies other manipulative tactics like gaslighting and blame shifting. Projection isn't always conscious. To defend against projection, stay grounded in your own truth. Projection loses its power when you stop internalizing it. Framing manipulation. Framing manipulation is a psychological technique where information is presented in a way that influences perception, decision-making, and emotional response. The way something is framed determines whether it is seen as positive or negative, beneficial or harmful, urgent or insignificant. By carefully choosing words, context, and emphasis, manipulators can guide others toward specific conclusions without outright lying. The power of framing lies in the fact that human cognition is not purely logical. Our brains process information based on associations, context, and emotional triggers, rather than objective facts alone. Framing can make the same situation appear completely different depending on how it is presented. Imagine a politician describing a policy as protecting jobs rather than restricting international trade. The wording shifts the emotional response. Even though both statements may describe the same action. In marketing, a product labeled as 95% fat-free sounds far more appealing than contains 5% fat, even though they mean the same thing. The human brain is wired to interpret language emotionally, so even small changes in wording can shape perception and decision-making. One of the most common uses of framing manipulation occurs in sales and advertising. A car dealership might describe a used car as certified pre-owned instead of used, making it sound more valuable. Food companies use labels like natural or organic, even when those terms have no regulatory meaning, because they create a positive frame. In financial transactions, stores advertise you save $30 rather than you spend $70, highlighting the gain rather than the loss. These subtle shifts in presentation play on psychological biases, leading consumers to make decisions they might not have otherwise. Framing is also a key tool in media and politics. News outlets can frame the same event in completely different ways to shape public perception. A protest can be described as a powerful movement for justice, or as a disruptive riot. The framing determines whether the audience views it as righteous or chaotic. Politicians use framing to control narratives. They might call a tax increase an investment in the future instead of higher costs for citizens. By carefully controlling how information is introduced, they manipulate emotions and opinions without changing the actual facts. Manipulative individuals use framing in relationships and personal interactions as well. A toxic partner might say, "You never spend time with me anymore," instead of, I miss spending time with you. Framing the issue as neglect rather than affection. A controlling boss might say, "We need dedicated employees who prioritize the company instead of acknowledging. They are demanding unpaid overtime." By framing their demands as values, they make resistance seem unreasonable. The darker side of framing manipulation is that it can be used to justify unethical behavior. Governments use military terms like collateral damage instead of civilian casualties to downplay violence. Companies rebrand layoffs as strategic restructuring to avoid backlash. Abusive individuals might say, "I'm only tough on you because I care," reframing their cruelty as concern. These tactics distort reality, making it harder for people to recognize manipulation and resist it. The best defense against framing manipulation is critical thinking. Whenever information is presented in an emotionally charged way, ask yourself, is this the full picture or just one perspective? Look for alternative frames. How would this situation sound if phrased differently? Compare different sources, especially when dealing with news, politics, or sales tactics. If someone presents a choice as your only option, challenge that assumption and consider alternatives. Understanding framing manipulation allows you to see through surface-level persuasion and analyze the true meaning behind words. When you recognize how framing is being used, you can take back control over your own thoughts and decisions, ensuring that you are making choices based on reality, not rhetorical tricks. Social proof exploitation. Social proof exploitation is a psychological manipulation technique where people are influenced to conform to a behavior, belief, or decision simply because they see others doing the same. Social proof is the natural human tendency to look to others for guidance in uncertain situations. When used ethically, it helps people make informed decisions. When exploited, it is used to manipulate emotions, override critical thinking, and pressure individuals into compliance. The foundation of social proof lies in evolutionary psychology. In early human societies, survival depended on group behavior. A large number of people ran in one direction. It was safer to follow them than to stop and question why. This instinct still exists today. When we see a long line outside a restaurant, we assume the food must be good. If a product has thousands of positive reviews, we believe it must be worth buying. If everyone in a social setting seems to agree with an opinion, we feel pressure to conform, even if we privately disagree. Social proof is one of the most exploited tactics in sales and marketing. Companies flood their websites with fake testimonials, exaggerated customer reviews, and artificial popularity indicators like over 1 million satisfied customers to create the illusion that their product is widely loved. Influencers are paid to promote brands, making it seem as though their endorsements are genuine rather than financially motivated. Businesses also use tactics like bestseller tags, countdown timers, and trending now labels to create a false sense of urgency, making people buy based on perceived popularity rather than personal need. This technique is especially powerful in high-pressure sales environments. A real estate agent might say, "This house has had multiple offers. Today should act fast, even if no offers exist." A car dealership might tell a hesitant buyer, "Most people who test drive this car buy it on the spot," creating the fear of missing out. These tactics exploit the human desire to fit in, making people feel that rejecting the offer would mean going against the crowd. Social proof is also a major tool in politics, media, and social movements. When the same narrative is repeated across multiple platforms, people assume it must be true because everyone is saying it. This is why propaganda campaigns use repetition, celebrity endorsements, and mass rallies to create the illusion of consensus, making dissent feel socially unacceptable. Manipulative leaders surround themselves with cheering supporters to make it seem like their ideas are universally popular, even if a large portion of the population disagrees. In personal relationships, social proof exploitation appears in the form of peer pressure and groupthink. A toxic partner might say, "Everyone thinks you're overreacting," to invalidate feelings and enforce compliance. In workplaces, an unethical practice might be justified with "This is just how we do things here," making employees hesitant to challenge misconduct. Even in everyday interactions, people often feel pressure to go along with questionable behavior, simply because no one else seems to have a problem with it. The danger of social proof exploitation is that it bypasses independent thought. When people assume that something is right just because it is popular, they stop questioning its validity. This is how misinformation spreads, scams gain traction, and harmful social norms persist. People are less likely to challenge authority, resist peer pressure, or make decisions based on personal values when they are bombarded with the illusion that everyone else is on board. To protect yourself from social proof exploitation, practice conscious skepticism. Whenever you feel pressured to conform because everyone is doing it, stop and ask, "Is this actually the best choice, or just the most popular one?" Look for real evidence instead of relying on crowd behavior. Just because something is widely accepted doesn't mean it is true, ethical, or beneficial. The ability to resist social proof exploitation is a mark of independent thinking. When you understand that popularity does not equal truth, you free yourself from the need to follow the crowd. Whether it's a purchase, an idea, or a belief system, making decisions based on reason rather than social pressure puts you in control of your own mind. Cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is a psychological phenomenon that occurs when a person holds two conflicting beliefs, attitudes, or values at the same time, creating a deep sense of internal discomfort. The human brain craves consistency, So when contradictions arise, it struggles to resolve them, often by altering beliefs, justifying irrational behavior, or rejecting inconvenient facts. This effect is one of the most powerful drivers of human decision-making, and when exploited, it can be used to manipulate people into changing their opinions, reinforcing destructive behaviors, or even accepting false narratives. At its core, cognitive dissonance arises when actions and beliefs don't align. For example, if someone sees themselves as an honest person but is caught lying, they experience a psychological conflict. To reduce the discomfort, they might justify the lie, shift blame, or even change their belief. Instead of admitting fault, the brain seeks an explanation that restores harmony between thoughts and actions. This phenomenon is widely exploited in marketing, politics, and social influence. Advertisers use cognitive dissonance to make consumers uncomfortable with their current choices, pushing them toward a desired behavior. A luxury brand might imply, if you truly value success, you should be driving this car. If a person sees themselves as successful but doesn't own the car, they feel a contradiction. To resolve it, they either dismiss the brand's claim or, more commonly, they buy the car to align with their self-image. Cognitive dissonance is also a favorite tool in cults, toxic relationships, and manipulation tactics. A cult leader might preach love and acceptance, but enforce extreme obedience. When followers notice this contradiction, instead of questioning the leader, they often justify the rules or blame themselves. Similarly, an abusive partner might claim to love their victim while treating them cruelly. The victim, rather than accepting that love and abuse cannot coexist, may justify the abuse, reinforcing the toxic cycle. One of the darkest applications of cognitive dissonance is in political and ideological manipulation. When people invest in a belief system, they resist evidence that contradicts it because admitting they were wrong would cause too much internal conflict. This is why people double down on misinformation, defend corrupt leaders, or justify unethical actions that align with their group identity. Rather than changing their beliefs in response to new evidence, they reject or reinterpret the evidence to maintain psychological comfort. The power of cognitive dissonance is that it locks people into their existing decisions and makes them resistant to change. Once someone has invested in an idea, a relationship, or a decision, their brain works overtime to defend even against logic. This is why people continue bad habits, stay in toxic situations, and cling to outdated beliefs long after they stop serving them. The fear of admitting error is often stronger than the desire for truth. To protect yourself from cognitive dissonance, manipulation, regularly challenge your own assumptions. When you feel discomfort or defensiveness in response to new information, ask yourself, am I resisting this because it's false, or because it contradicts what I want to believe. Recognizing dissonance is the first step to breaking free from its hold. Learning to sit with discomfort rather than automatically justifying past choices allows for true intellectual and emotional growth. Understanding cognitive dissonance gives you the power to see through manipulation, escape self-deception, and make decisions based on truth rather than psychological comfort. Once you learn to navigate the tension between conflicting thoughts, you become less susceptible to external influence and more capable of thinking independently. Repetition hypnosis. Repetition hypnosis is a method where ideas, phrases, or actions are repeated so frequently that they bypass conscious scrutiny and lodge deeply within the subconscious. Politicians and media outlets repeat catchphrases like "we are under attack" or "the other side is corrupt" to manipulate perception. On social media, constant exposure to trends, slogans, or misinformation in echo chambers reinforces collective ideas. Algorithms amplify certain narratives, giving a false sense of consensus. The more someone encounters a view online, the more valid it feels, even if it's biased or false. To combat repetition hypnosis, be aware of messages you hear often. Ask yourself, do I believe this because it's true or because it's familiar? Seek different perspectives to challenge repeated messages and avoid echo chambers. If someone keeps repeating something, they may be programming your perception, not offering truth. The strength of repetition hypnosis lies in its subtlety. Eventually, people begin to echo the repeated idea as their own. Recognizing this technique empowers you to escape mental conditioning and choose based on reasoning, not repetition. True independent thinking begins when you examine not just the message, but how often and why you hear it. These mantras work not because they are compelling, but because their repetition gives them weight. Propaganda thrives on constant repetition. The same principle applies in religion and ideology. Daily chants, prayers, and affirmations reinforce beliefs and silence skepticism. Extremist groups and cults echo doctrines endlessly, making any alternative viewpoints seem foreign or wrong. In abusive relationships, repetition hypnosis appears when a partner constantly tells the other, "You're nothing without me," or "no one else would want you." Over time, the victim adopts these messages as personal truths. Similarly, repeated insults in bullying shape how victims see themselves, turning the abuser's words into internal narratives. This approach is often employed in marketing, propaganda, social training, and manipulation to shape beliefs and behaviors without the person noticing they're being influenced. Our brains are pattern-seeking machines, and the more a message is repeated, the more familiar and, thus, believably becomes, even if it lacks logic. Repetition strengthens neural connections. The more a message is heard, the easier it is to recall, and the more trustworthy it feels. Familiarity often gets mistaken for truth, which is why repeated lies can become indistinguishable from facts. The saying, "A lie told often enough becomes the truth," reflects a psychological reality. Advertisers depend on repetition to implant brand slogans and jingles into our minds. If you've ever remembered a jingle or instantly linked a brand to an emotion, you've experienced repetition hypnosis. Frequent exposure to a message makes it feel natural, encouraging belief and action. In politics, repetition is used to mold public opinion and cement narratives. Digital spaces also showcase repetition hypnosis. Priming. Priming is a subtle psychological technique in which prior exposure to specific stimuli influences a person's decisions, behavior, or thoughts without conscious awareness. This method works by planting associations in the subconscious, guiding future reactions when similar triggers arise. In advertising, priming is everywhere. Retailers prime customers by playing classical music. Was I exposed to something that may have nudged me? Recognizing pre-exposure helps distinguish between your real opinions and those planted by suggestion. Being mindful of priming protects your mental autonomy, ensuring your choices come from conscious thought rather than hidden influence. In upscale stores, to suggest luxury or using colors like red and yellow in fast food to subconsciously trigger hunger. Grocery stores place pricey items at eye level and use pleasant scents to create a sense of comfort, encouraging purchases. In politics and media, priming controls how we interpret issues. Words like strong leader prime audiences to see a politician positively, while calling someone controversial immediately casts doubt. Movements also use symbolic images and catchphrases to instill emotional responses before people know all the facts. It's common in advertising, politics, and everyday conversations, essentially any area where influencing someone subtly matters. A manipulative person may say, "You've always been so kind," before making a request, nudging the listener to act in line with that identity. Repeated comments about someone's behavior can alter how you perceive them, even before direct experience. Priming also shapes how we view ourselves. Studies show that exposure to positive words like smart or capable can improve performance on mental tasks. Conversely, repeated exposure to negative words can reduce confidence and reinforce destructive patterns. When someone is constantly labeled lazy or stupid, they begin to internalize that identity, acting in ways that reinforce it. By shaping what someone sees, hears, or experiences before a choice, a manipulator can subtly guide their response without detection. The brain connects experiences, words, and images through complex associations. Even a small suggestion can spark a chain reaction of linked thoughts. For instance, if someone sees the word yellow and is then asked to name a fruit, they are more likely to say banana than apple because the subconscious has been primed. This automatic association is widely used to direct people's choices. In personal interactions, priming happens subtly but frequently. To guard against priming, become aware of subtle cues that may influence your thinking. Ask, why am I thinking this way? Overloading with information. Overloading with information is a tactic where someone is swamped with excessive data, making it difficult to process, evaluate, or decide clearly. This manipulation method overwhelms the mind with facts, distractions, or choices to confuse, fatigue, and pressure someone into compliance. It's often seen in propaganda, business, deception, and relationships. Cults, scam artists, and authoritarian regimes use this technique to keep people too distracted to resist. To fight back, simplify your decision-making. Break complex information into smaller parts. Ask, what is the core issue here? Focus on the essentials and filter out noise. In business or legal matters, read carefully and ask for clarification. If something feels overly complex, it may be deliberate. Take your time. Urgency is another tactic paired with overload to rush you into bad choices. Step back and seek a second opinion. Recognizing when you're being overloaded helps you take back control. Ensuring choices are made with clarity, not confusion. The brain has a limit on how much it can handle at once. When faced with too much, cognitive overload kicks in. Thinking becomes harder. Decisions slow, and shortcuts like emotional responses or reliance on authority replace critical thinking. Manipulators use this overload to direct decisions while making victims feel like they chose freely. This method thrives in corporate and legal settings. Contracts filled with dense language make it nearly impossible for an average person to fully understand. People often sign without reading thoroughly due to the overload. Banks, insurers, and tech firms exploit this, hiding important terms in complex texts, knowing users will accept without question. Politically, it works by flooding the public with conflicting reports, changing narratives, and endless headlines. This confusion leads to apathy, where people stop questioning or blindly believe whatever is most emotional or repeated. Marketers also rely on information overload. A car dealer may offer too many financing options or bonus features to confuse the buyer, who eventually picks the easiest sounding deal without fully understanding it. Websites overload users with pop-ups, banners, and deals to force fast decisions. In relationships, manipulators use this technique to gaslight or control. They may throw out multiple accusations or unrelated arguments to derail logic and exhaust the other person. A toxic boss might overload an employee with tasks to keep them distracted and under pressure. Narcissists may flood a conversation with random topics, making it impossible to respond clearly, leading to frustration and submission. The ultimate aim is to wear someone down mentally, so they are more likely to comply. Ben Franklin Effect. The Ben Franklin Effect describes how someone who does you a small favor is more likely to help you again later. This happens because their brain justifies the favor by assuming they must like you, aligning their actions with their beliefs, rather than thinking they helped out of obligation. Instead of winning someone over with big gestures, try asking for a minor favor like advice or borrowing a pen. If you feel compelled to keep giving without support in return, take a step back and assess whether you're being manipulated. Understanding the Ben Franklin effect empowers you to use it positively to build real bonds and loyalty while staying alert to those who may use it to take advantage of you. This creates investment, which subtly shifts their perception. However, the effect can be misused. Manipulators and scammers exploit it to create fake loyalty. They begin with innocent requests and gradually escalate them. A scammer may first ask for a quick favor, then more money or time. Toxic relationships often follow this pattern. Small requests turn into large, unhealthy demands. They reinterpret it as a sign of affection or connection. Named after Benjamin Franklin, this effect comes from a story where Franklin asked a political opponent to lend him a rare book. The man obliged, and after Franklin returned it with a thank you note, the previously cold relationship warmed. The rival became a supporter, and they eventually built a friendly alliance. Franklin had tapped into a deep psychological truth. Small investments trigger emotional alignment and future cooperation. The driving force behind this effect is cognitive dissonance. When someone helps a person they don't like, their brain feels a contradiction. Rather than admit they helped someone they disliked, the mind shifts beliefs to match the behavior. I must like them if I helped. This phenomenon is used in leadership, sales, and negotiations. Smart influencers ask for small favors first, which creates a bond that encourages further support. Political figures and brand marketers use it too. Free trials, quick surveys, or small giveaways start a cycle of commitment. Once someone gives time or effort, they feel a subconscious pull to continue. In relationships, this effect helps build or rebuild trust. To protect yourself, watch for repeated favor requests followed by increasing demands. Pygmalion Effect. The Pygmalion Effect is the idea that people perform better when higher expectations are placed on them. When someone believes they can succeed and others believe it too, they tend to rise to meet those expectations. The term comes from a Greek myth where a sculptor, Pygmalion, falls in love with a statue he made. Groups labeled as high achievers tend to do better, while those expected to fail often underperform. This is why positive representation and belief matter so much. Set high but realistic expectations and provide the tools to meet them. Be aware of how your words influence others and how theirs affect you. If someone is using the Pygmalion effect manipulatively, recognize the pattern and maintain your boundaries. When applied with sincerity, the Pygmalion effect is a powerful tool to unlock success, build confidence, and spark real transformation. The flip side is the golem effect, where low expectations cause poor results. A teacher who assumes a student is slow may give less support, leading to underperformance. A boss who doubts an employee may pass them over, stunting growth. His deep belief in the statue brings it to life. The story represents how belief and expectation can shape real outcomes. People treated as capable often become capable because of how they're perceived. This concept was proven in an experiment by Robert Rosenthal and Lenore Jacobson. Teachers were told certain students were future high achievers, though the students were randomly selected. By the end of the school year, those students outperformed others because teachers gave them more attention, challenges, and support, driven by belief. This effect applies everywhere: work, sports, parenting, and self-growth. A boss who sees potential in an employee gives them better tasks and feedback, boosting their performance. A coach who treats an athlete as elite encourages greater effort. Parents who believe in their children help them build confidence and success. Societal expectations also create self-fulfilling results. In relationships, how we treat others can shape their self-image. Encouraging words and belief can unlock someone's potential, while doubt and criticism can cause them to shrink back. Motivational coaches use the Pygmalion effect to inspire personal growth through belief, high standards, and positive self-talk. But this effect can be exploited too. Some use praise and high expectations to push others harder while giving little in return. A manipulative partner may use fake encouragement to guilt someone into constantly trying to live up to false praise. To use this effect constructively, pair belief with support. Negative reinforcement. Negative reinforcement is a psychological strategy that removes an unpleasant stimulus to strengthen a specific behavior. Unlike punishment, which adds something negative to stop an action, negative reinforcement takes something bad away to encourage it. While this method can help build good habits or motivate people, it's often abused in relationships, workplaces, and systems of control. The human brain seeks comfort and avoids pain. So, when a behavior makes discomfort disappear, the brain remembers it and repeats it. That's what makes negative reinforcement such a powerful force. People will often comply just to escape discomfort, even if it goes against their best interest. For example, a child throws a tantrum in a store and gets what they want. Parents just want to avoid the embarrassment. The child then learns that tantrums remove that discomfort and are more likely to repeat it. In toxic relationships, a partner might give the silent treatment until the other gives in relief, becomes the reward, reinforcing unhealthy behavior. In the workplace, bosses may load employees with pressure. But when someone sacrifices their personal time, that pressure eases, teaching them that overwork is the only path to peace. Similarly, manipulative coworkers may guilt-trip others until they comply, then back off, conditioning them to fear saying no. Marketing also takes advantage of this. Subscription services make canceling difficult, so the hassle keeps people paying. Ads spark fear. Your skin is aging. Then offer a product that relieves that fear. A government might enforce harsh restrictions, then ease them slightly when the public complies, giving the illusion of reward. Social groups may do the same with guilt or exclusion. Over time, this creates mental conditioning where people obey just to avoid pain. They stop questioning and react automatically. This is how people remain stuck in abusive jobs or relationships. They've been taught that suffering ends only when they comply. To escape this cycle, you must learn to recognize when you're being driven by discomfort. Ask yourself, am I doing this because I want to, or because I'm afraid not to? Setting boundaries and accepting short-term discomfort is often the only way to regain control. Manipulators count on your fear of temporary pain, but once you stop reacting automatically, you take back your power. False flattery. False flattery is a manipulation tactic that uses insincere praise to influence or control others. Unlike genuine compliments, which come from a place of honesty and care, false flattery is calculated. It's designed to lower your guard, create emotional dependence, or get something in return. People love being praised, so they often miss the hidden motives behind flattering words. Compliments release dopamine, the brain's feel-good chemical, making us more trusting, agreeable, and open. Manipulators know this and use it to sway decisions, create loyalty, or distract from red flags. In sales, false flattery is everywhere. A car dealer might say, "You strike me as someone who knows a good deal," to make a buyer feel smart. A store clerk may say, "That outfit looks amazing on you," just to push a sale. Even in job interviews, flattery is used to lower salary expectations. "We're so impressed with your skills," can make someone accept less out of gratitude. In toxic relationships, false flattery often shows up early. A manipulative partner might say, "You're the most amazing person I've ever met," to hook their target emotionally. This is part of a bigger tactic called love bombing, excessive praise used to gain control. Once the praise fades, the victim craves it and becomes dependent. In politics, leaders use flattery to win support. Our citizens are the best in the world. Appeals to ego, not logic. Companies say things like, "We're a family," while overworking staff. In friendships or at work, someone might say, "You're way better at this than me," just to push responsibility onto you. Or a friend might say, "You're always so generous, Ken. You cover this bill." Praise becomes pressure. What makes false flattery dangerous is that we rarely question praise. We trust it. But when someone flatters you right before asking for something, it's time to pause. Real compliments are specific, honest, and don't expect anything in return. Flattery, on the other hand, is vague, excessive, or too good to be true. If someone constantly praises you but takes advantage of you, those words may be nothing but bait. The best way to protect yourself: know your worth. When you don't need constant praise from others, manipulative flattery loses its grip. The contrast principle. The contrast principle is a psychological trick that shifts your perception by showing you two different things back to back, making one seem better or worse just by comparison. Rather than judging something on its own, the brain naturally compares. If you dip one hand in cold water and the other in hot, then both into lukewarm water, they'll feel completely different even though it's the same temperature. This principle is used heavily in marketing, sales, and relationships to manipulate decisions and emotions. For example, a real estate agent might first show a terrible house so that the next average one looks amazing by comparison. Car dealerships do the same: show an expensive car first, then offer a slightly cheaper one that feels like a bargain. Stores often mark up prices only to slash them later. A $300 jacket on sale for $120 feels like a deal, even if it was never worth $300. Luxury brands also inflate prices on high-end items so that mid-range products seem affordable. In negotiations, a seller may start high, knowing they'll settle for less, making the buyer feel like they got a deal even if it was the intended price all along. Employers may lowball salary offers, then slightly raise them, making you feel like you've won when you're still underpaid. The contrast principle doesn't just apply to money. It affects how we view people and experiences. If someone dates a rude partner, the next person who's just decent might seem incredibly kind. This is why rebound relationships often feel intense. The comparison distorts judgment. In abusive relationships, extreme lows followed by small acts of kindness make the abuser seem caring. A toxic boss might pile on pressure, then ease up just enough for the employee to feel grateful. The key to protecting yourself: learn to evaluate things independently. Ask, would I still think this is a good deal person, opportunity if I hadn't seen the first one. Look beyond comparisons. See value for what it is, not what it's stacked up against. Recognizing the contrast trick allows you to make clearer, more grounded choices. Intermittent reinforcement. Intermittent reinforcement is one of the most powerful forms of psychological conditioning. It works by delivering rewards inconsistently, sometimes giving praise, approval, or attention, and sometimes withholding it. This unpredictability creates addiction. You keep chasing the reward because you never know when it's coming next. It's the same principle behind gambling, social media, obsession, and emotionally abusive relationships. Our brains crave patterns, but unpredictability makes the reward feel more exciting. When rewards are given regularly, motivation remains stable. But when they're random, the brain becomes more focused, working harder, hoping the reward is just around the corner. Slot machines are designed this way. If they paid every third time, players would lose interest. But by rewarding randomly, they keep players hooked. Each pull could be the one. That potential keeps people trapped. Social media works the same. One post gets a lot of likes, the next gets barely any. This inconsistency makes users check obsessively, waiting for their next dopamine hit. Notifications, email, alerts, and app updates are all built on this model. In relationships, this tactic is deeply manipulative. A toxic partner may alternate between affection and distance. The result: the other person clings harder, hoping for another moment of love. Because that affection comes unpredictably, it feels more precious and more addictive. In work environments, employers may praise employees only occasionally, ignoring them the rest of the time. But those small rewards keep people trying harder, believing their next effort will be noticed. That's how people stay in draining jobs, because sometimes they're seen. Cults, scams, and controlling groups also rely on intermittent reinforcement. A leader may offer affection one day and cold silence the next. The follower becomes desperate to earn back approval. This same trick appears in pyramid schemes, where small payouts create false hope. The most dangerous part. Logic often fails under this pattern. Even when someone knows they're being mistreated, they stay hoping next time will be different. To break free, recognize the signs. Ask yourself, am I staying for consistent rewards or just hoping they'll come? Real love, respect, and success are steady, not unpredictable highs. True fulfillment comes from consistency, not emotional chaos. When you seek stability instead of chasing crumbs, you regain control of your life. The fear, then relief trick. The fear, then relief trick is a manipulation method that uses sudden emotional shifts to gain control. It starts by causing fear or stress, then immediately removing it. This emotional roller coaster leaves a person vulnerable and far more likely to agree, comply, or give in. Our brains are wired to react intensely to fear. When we feel threatened, our critical thinking shuts down. We focus entirely on escaping the discomfort. So, when fear is suddenly replaced with kindness or relief, it overwhelms the system. That relief feels so powerful, we drop our guard, become highly suggestible. Police interrogations often use this tactic. A suspect is grilled with intense accusations, made to feel cornered, then suddenly offered a drink or reassurance. That shift in tone creates a window where the suspect is more likely to confess, even if they're innocent. Scammers also use this trick. A fake call from the IRS may threaten arrest or fines. After panic sets in, the caller says, "We can fix this if you pay now." The fear fades, and the victim acts out of relief. Their brain is so desperate to escape the stress, they stop questioning whether the threat was even real. Salespeople use similar tactics. What if you lose your home? They ask, then present their product as the solution. Or, only 3 left. If you don't buy now, you'll miss out. The fear builds, and the product becomes a form of relief. Toxic relationships use this constantly. A partner may start a fight, make you feel guilty, and then suddenly say, "I just love you so much." That emotional whiplash makes forgiveness easier manipulation disguised as affection. Even employers use this method. A boss may hint at job loss, then say, "But if you stay late and work weekends, I'll put in a good word." Out of relief, the employee agrees, missing the manipulation entirely. To protect yourself, pause when fear strikes. Ask, is this fear real lore manufactured to pressure me? Don't rush to accept the relief that follows. Take a step back, breathe, and think critically. When you stop reacting immediately, manipulators lose their power over you. Reverse psychology. Reverse psychology is a mental manipulation method where someone suggests the opposite of what they truly want. Knowing the other person will reject that suggestion and do exactly what was intended. This tactic uses the human instinct to resist being told what to do. Rather than direct persuasion, the manipulator subtly offers a suggestion that appeals to ego, independence, or the urge to prove oneself. It works because people value their autonomy. When they feel it's being threatened, they push back. By hinting at an undesired outcome, the manipulator triggers this response, making the person do what was originally wanted. Parents often use it with kids. If a child refuses to eat veggies, a parent might say, "You probably can't finish that broccoli," motivating the child to eat to prove them wrong. Teens might be told, "You probably won't clean your room today, knowing they'll do the opposite. Marketers use it too. Luxury brands may say, "Not for everyone," which sparks desire in customers who want to feel special. A salesperson might say, "This product isn't for everyone. It's for serious buyers," leading the buyer to prove they are serious. In social settings, if someone wants a friend to stay longer at a party, they might say, "You should probably go home," which can cause the friend to stay. A partner might say, "You're too busy for me today," prompting the other to make time. Politicians use it by saying, "People will say this is impossible," encouraging support from those eager to challenge that notion. Leaders might say, "No one will believe me," prompting listeners to believe more. It can also be a tool for self-improvement. Someone may tell themselves, "I probably won't work out today," which stirs motivation. Saying, "I'll just keep this bad habit," can trigger inner rebellion and lead to discipline. However, it can be harmful. A toxic partner might say, "You probably don't care enough to help," guilting the other into compliance. A boss might say, "I doubt you're committed enough," coercing extra effort. Used maliciously, it can trap people into proving themselves at their own expense. To protect against it, notice when a suggestion stirs defiance. Ask yourself, "Am I doing this because I want to, or because I feel I need to prove something?" Once you recognize the tactic, you can choose whether to follow or not. Reverse psychology is subtle, yet powerful. Mastering it begins with awareness. Planned vulnerability. Planned vulnerability is a calculated manipulation tactic where someone reveals weaknesses or insecurities to gain trust, sympathy, or control. Unlike true vulnerability, which fosters connection, planned vulnerability is used to create emotional imbalance. It lowers the target's guard, making them feel safe enough to open up and reciprocate. Humans are wired for reciprocity. When one person shares something personal, the other often feels compelled to do the same. Manipulators use this by disclosing selected vulnerabilities, drawing their target closer emotionally. One common arena for this is romantic manipulation. A toxic partner might share a painful story early in the relationship about betrayal or trauma to create instant intimacy. Their partner feels special for being trusted, but later, the manipulator uses this connection to justify harmful behavior. In workplaces, a boss might say, "I'm under so much pressure," making employees feel the need to overwork or sacrifice boundaries. Colleagues might talk about being overwhelmed to guilt others into covering for them. Salespeople and scammers also use this tactic. A con artist might say, "I've made mistakes, but learned a better way," seeming humble to build trust. Politicians may share personal stories to seem relatable, softening public perception. In social groups, someone might use exaggerated struggles to become the person others feel obligated to support. This creates emotional debt. The target feels responsible for helping. Over time, this obligation can be exploited. The victim feels guilty for setting limits, making it hard to break away. To guard against this, look for patterns. Does the person always share personal struggles when they want something? Do you feel emotionally pressured afterward? Real vulnerability develops gradually and naturally. Manipulative vulnerability appears quickly, or when something is needed. Offer compassion, but not obligation. Just because someone shares doesn't mean you must fix it. Recognize the difference to protect your boundaries. Guilt seeding. Guilt seeding is a manipulation method where someone plants subtle hints to make others feel guilty without direct blame. Unlike obvious guilt tripping, guilt seeding works quietly, planting small suggestions that grow over time. The goal is to make the target feel indebted, shaping behavior without confrontation. Guilt is powerful. When people feel it, they tend to comply or overcompensate. Manipulators rely on this to control others without needing to confront them directly. In families, a parent might say, "I sacrifice so much for you," making a child feel they aren't doing enough. A partner might say, "I always put you first, but I don't feel important," creating internal guilt even if there's no real fault. In friendships, someone might say, "I guess I shouldn't expect support from others," subtly shaming someone who has been supportive. At work, a boss might say, "I thought you were someone we could count on," when someone refuses an unreasonable task. This causes the employee to feel ashamed, even if they were justified. Colleagues might say, "Must be nice to take time off," implying selfishness. In relationships, a partner might say, "You probably don't even miss me," making the other person feel they need to prove love. These remarks leave lingering guilt, often unnoticed, until it deeply affects the target. Victims start to question themselves, trying harder to please the manipulator. To defend against guilt seeding, examine the guilt source. Are you truly responsible? Or are you being made to feel that way through subtle framing? Healthy relationships include open conversation. Manipulative ones create guilt without clarity. If someone repeatedly makes you feel guilty without reason, set a boundary. Say, "I understand your feelings, but I won't take responsibility for something I didn't do." Naming the pattern forces them to explain or back down. Separate real guilt from false guilt. Awareness breaks guilt's power, freeing you to make choices without being emotionally trapped. False consensus effect. The false consensus effect is a manipulation tactic where someone makes it seem like most people share a belief, behavior, or choice, even if they don't. This taps into our need for social validation. People naturally want to fit in, so they tend to go along with what they think everyone else believes. Manipulators use this to create pressure, making someone feel like an outsider for disagreeing. This effect is used in advertising when companies say things like 9 out of 10 people prefer this, or millions can't be wrong. Even without evidence, people are more likely to choose the option that seems popular. Influencers may say, "Everyone's talking about this trend," encouraging followers to join in. Politicians use it by claiming, "The majority supports this policy," making those who oppose feel isolated. Media outlets also use it by showing only one side of a debate, hiding opposition to create the illusion of widespread agreement. In workplaces, a boss might say, "We all agree on this deadline," even if many employees are unsure. This tactic pressures dissenters to stay silent. In relationships, a manipulative partner might say, "All my exes thought I was amazing," or "Everyone would think you're overreacting." This makes the victim question their feelings. Friends may say, "Everyone thinks you're being unfair," when it's just their own opinion. Scammers and MLM promoters use it too, saying, "Everyone in your position is investing, or thousands are making money with this," to push people into joining. To protect yourself, ask, "Who is everyone? Is there proof?" If someone says, "No one disagrees," ask them to be specific. Think independently and gather real perspectives. Just because something seems popular doesn't mean it is. Recognizing this tactic keeps you from conforming to manipulated norms and helps you make informed, authentic choices. Forced commitment. Forced commitment is a manipulation technique where someone pushes you to agree to something quickly, often before you've had time to think. Once you commit, even a little, it becomes harder to back out. This tactic uses the human desire to stay consistent with past actions. Once someone says yes to something small, they're more likely to say yes again and again, even if they begin to feel uncomfortable. In sales, it starts with questions like, "Wouldn't you love a car like this?" Once the customer agrees, they're asked to test drive it, then fill out paperwork. Each step adds commitment, making it harder to say no. This is called the yes ladder. Free trials that require a credit card also use this trick. Once you sign up, you're more likely to stay, even if you don't want the service, because you've already committed. At work, a boss might ask, "Can you stay 30 minutes late today?" That becomes regular over time. Or you may be given temporary tasks that become permanent once you accept. In relationships, it starts with small favors that gradually grow. Soon, you're doing things you never agreed to originally. In extreme cases, cults and scams use small steps to get people invested. Signing a petition, then attending meetings, then donating. Each small act builds until leaving feels like betrayal. Scammers might say, "Can I send you more info?" Once you agree, they push further. To protect yourself, pause when asked to commit quickly. Ask, "Would I choose this if I had more time?" Real opportunities allow space for thought. If you feel rushed, step back, say, "I need time to think." Spotting forced commitment early helps you stay in control and avoid being pulled deeper into something you don't truly want. Deliberate misinterpretation. Deliberate misinterpretation is a manipulation tactic where someone twists your words or intentions to make you look wrong, unreasonable, or guilty. This is done on purpose to confuse, discredit, or gaslight you, putting you on the defensive and allowing the manipulator to control the conversation. It works because people naturally want to correct misunderstandings. When someone distorts your meaning, you feel the urge to explain. Manipulators use this against you, turning clear communication into endless clarification. In arguments, someone might take a neutral comment like, "We should save more this year," and respond, "Oh, so you think I'm bad with money?" Suddenly, you're defending yourself over something you never said. In politics, a leader might say, "We need regulation," and opponents twist it into, "They want to destroy businesses," distracting from the real issue. Media outlets often use dramatic headlines that misinterpret quotes to spark outrage. In toxic relationships, it's a gaslighting tool. If you say, "I need space," a partner might respond, "You don't love me anymore," making you feel guilty for a normal need. In workplaces, a request for fair treatment might be twisted into "You're just lazy" or "You're difficult." Manipulators turn valid statements into accusations. Even in legal settings, misinterpretation is used to shake confidence or extract confessions. To defend against this, don't get pulled into over-explaining. Instead, calmly say, "That's not what I meant." If someone keeps misrepresenting your words, recognize it as a tactic. Clarify once, then stop justifying. Stay firm and avoid emotional reactions. Awareness is key. When you see the game, you stop playing into it. You protect your voice and keep control over how your words are understood. Confession triggers. Confession triggers are a psychological manipulation method where someone is subtly pressured or deceived into revealing private information, admitting guilt, or confessing something they wouldn't otherwise disclose. This tactic appears in interrogations, relationships, and even casual social settings to extract sensitive details without direct confrontation. A boss might say, "I've been hearing things. Anything you want to tell me?" A fake bank rep might call and say, "I already know what happened, so you might as well tell me." Can cause a child to confess even if innocent, just to avoid further suspicion. While sometimes effective, this can build long-term anxiety and distrust of authority. We've noticed suspicious activity can you confirm some transactions. The target, trying to prove innocence, may reveal sensitive financial info. Similarly, scammers posing as tech support use pressure tactics to make people expose personal data. Even if the employee has done nothing wrong, fear and anxiety might lead them to overshare. Gossipers use similar tactics. People are saying you're hiding something. If someone claims to already know but won't give details, it's likely a bluff. Stay calm. Don't over-explain and ask, what exactly are you referring to? That forces clarity. Avoid rushing to justify your self-neutral responses are stronger. Confession triggers thrive on your instinct to resolve tension once you recognize that you gain power. Maintain control of your responses and don't let yourself be pushed into unnecessary self-incrimination. The pressure can cause someone to confess just to clear their name. The key lies in making the target believe that confessing is the safest or most logical option, even when it isn't. Our brains are wired to seek relief from guilt and discomfort. If a person feels subtly accused, they may instinctively overshare or confess just to relieve internal tension. Manipulators exploit this by creating scenarios where the target feels compelled to justify themselves, admit wrongdoing, or reveal secrets to avoid imagined consequences. A classic use is in police interrogations. Statements like, "We already know what happened, just tell us the details," make the suspect feel that confession is inevitable, even if they're innocent. Another common line is, "If you cooperate now, things will be easier," implying that confessing is the best way to avoid punishment. These tactics have even led to false confessions from innocent people. In relationships, confession triggers can be used to guilt someone into revealing secrets. A manipulative partner might say, "I already know what you did, just be honest," causing the other to dig for something to confess, even if they've done nothing wrong. Silence is also a weapon. Long pauses and intense stares after vague accusations can pressure someone into confessing just to end the discomfort. Workplaces and social groups are also fertile ground for confession triggers. Scammers love this strategy. Even parents use confession triggers, often unintentionally. To protect yourself, ask, do they actually have evidence, or are they fishing?